Following the massacre, the assailant or assailants remain unknown.
Ever get that feeling, when you stumble across something, some story, and you can't help but get totally engrossed? That's kind of how I felt when I first heard about the Hinterkaifeck murders. It's one of those crimes that just grabs you. Yeah, both chilling and just endlessly fascinating. So today we're going back in time, 1922 Germany. Picture a secluded farmstead where this gruesome, unsolved crime took place. Just imagine, an entire family gone, and their maid, all found dead in their home. No motive, no justice. And the scene itself, Hinterkaifeck. It's like something out of a movie, eerie. This small farmstead, kind of tucked away about 70 kilometers outside of Munich. The date, March 31st, 1922. The day this horrifying discovery just shook the region. So let's lay it all out, the basics. We've got Andreas Gruber, he was 63, the father. And then Cäzilia, his wife, 72 years old. Their daughter, Viktoria Gabriel, a widow just 5. And her 2 young kids, 7-year-old Cäzilia and little Josef, only 2. Oh, we can't forget Maria Baumgartner, the family maid, 44 years old. All of them brutally murdered. And the murder weapon, a pickaxe, just left there at the scene. Almost like a calling card, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Hinterkaifeck murders, they weren't just some horrific crime. They give us this really stark look into a really volatile time in German history. We're talking right after World War I. Think about it. Massive economic instability, social unrest, just widespread trauma. To really get the impact of this case, you got to understand that context. Imagine the desperation, the suspicion, the potential for violence that was just woven into everyday life in Germany after the war. It's a world away from how we might see a rural crime scene today.
It's true. It's so easy to forget that historical events, they don't happen in a vacuum, right? And you're right, the societal context adds a whole other level of complexity to this. And speaking of layers, this is where things in Hinterkaifeck take an even stranger turn. Ready for this? There's evidence that someone kept living on the farm after the murders. And I don't mean just like a door left open. Someone was actually living there, taking care of the cattle, eating the family's food, even using the fireplace. It's almost as if they were, trying to pretend everything was normal. In the middle of this awful scene, and get this, the family dog, completely unharmed.
That detail always gets me, the dog. It's like, why? Why spare the dog? It suggests that the killer knew the family, knew the dog wouldn't cause problems, or maybe it points to something even more, more complex, a relationship between the killer and the family that we just can't understand. It's these little things, these unsettling questions that have kept people guessing for well over 100 years now.
Yeah, it's like they just slipped right into the family's life after taking it,
Yeah.
Gives me chills just thinking about it. So the investigators were stumped, huh?
Oh, absolutely. It's a head-scratcher from the get-go. Their first thought, like with a lot of these cases, was robbery. Makes sense, right? Family living out there, kind of isolated. But here's where it gets weird. Remember we talked about post-war Germany? Inflation was out of control back then. Cash was basically useless, so why hit a farm where, let's face it, they might not even have much of value? And even weirder, why leave anything valuable behind? It's just off.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of what a robber would do. Those inconsistencies. Kind of makes you wonder if something else was going on, something darker. So, not robbery. What about a family feud gone wrong?
Now that's a popular theory, and it's not totally crazy. Families back then, let's just say they could be complicated. Throw in the stress of life after the war, money problems, maybe some old grudge, who knows? It's possible.
Everyone's got their secrets, right? Sometimes dark ones. But were there any rumors about the Grubers? Anything that might give them a reason to,
That's the thing. While there's a lot of talk, actually finding proof of a family fight, almost impossible. There are stories, sure, whispers about arguments over inheritance even. Well, some really messed up stuff about Andreas Gruber and his daughter. But whispers aren't evidence, are they? Without something concrete, some proof to back it up, we have to be careful. We can't just jump to conclusions based on rumors.
You're right, it's a slippery slope. Especially with something that happened so long ago. It's almost like the more time passes, the harder it is to separate fact from fiction. Okay, so we're not sure about robbery, and a family feud is kind of shaky. What about a crime of passion? That's always an interesting possibility.
Right. That's where things get really intriguing. Think about it. Secret affairs, jealousy, maybe even an illegitimate child, who knows? And don't forget, Viktoria, the daughter, she was widowed. Could there have been a jealous ex-lover, someone looking for revenge? Or maybe someone saw their chance, a way to get rid of the family and start over, maybe with Viktoria.
Hold on, let me get this straight. We've got this isolated farm, a family hiding secrets, rumors of affairs, and a brutal murder with no clear motive. This is like something straight out of one of those old detective novels.
Exactly, and just like a good mystery novel, the Hinterkaifeck murders, they've fascinated people for over a century. There's something about the unknown that just draws us in. In fact, they've even made a few movies about it.
That's right, I almost forgot about the films. Guess those filmmakers couldn't resist a good mystery either. But before we get into that, you mentioned something earlier that really caught my attention. You said there was proof that someone was living on the farm after the murders. Can you tell me more about that? What kind of proof are we talking about?
It's true, you always hear about crime scenes being messy, right? Signs of a fight, things thrown around. But here, it's almost the opposite. Like, they wanted to make it seem normal.
It's creepy, isn't it? The way they kept things up for days, maybe even a whole week. They were taking care of the farm, cooking, almost like the Grubers were still alive. Makes you wonder if it was about more than just getting rid of witnesses.
Yeah, like they were trying to, I don't know, take over their lives, even after death. So what exactly did they find? What kind of evidence are we talking about? Well, besides the obvious, like the animals being fed, the fireplace being used, there were other smaller things. Neighbors said they saw smoke from the chimney, so someone was keeping the fire going. And get this, a mechanic went there to fix something, and he said he saw someone in the attic. Thought it was one of the family members.
Oh, wow. He didn't think anything of it.
Well, back then, news traveled slow. He might not have even heard about the murders yet.
So, lots of little clues, but nothing concrete. Did any of it lead them to a suspect? Someone specific?
Nope. They investigated everything, looked at all the evidence, but nothing. The Hinterkaifeck murders are still unsolved.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. If someone does something so awful, then just disappears.
But even without knowing who did it, the whole thing says something about us, you know? About the dark parts of humanity, the things we don't understand. And some stories, they just stick with us, even after all this time. That's why we're still talking about it, right? For all we know, some mysteries just aren't meant to be solved. They make us realize that some questions, they don't have answers. It's unsettling, but it's the truth.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. This case, it's got everything, twists, turns, unanswered questions. It reminds us that some stories, they never really end. For those of you who want to go deeper, we'll have some more info in the show notes. It's a wild ride, trust me.